Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you all, and thank you, Aura. I love the living laboratory model because when I think about pluralism, the idea of a laboratory is perfect. In a laboratory, you actually celebrate the unexpected. You can get it right and you can get it wrong. There are really mistakes that get made in laboratories. It's not that all judgment is suspended, but there's a kind of fearlessness and a kind of safety that's created about the ability to make those mistakes, right? So yes, you decide about boundaries, but the language you used is also perfect. You said you've made a covenant in your institution, but we all know that covenants have to be recovenanted. So you decide, and then you redecide, and then you redecide again. I mean, after all, we're the people who couldn't even get through the first 5 books of Scripture without saying we wanted to have the 5th book be a recapitulation of the first 4. And once you tell people within one generation you can have a retelling of the law, you now know you can have a 3rd telling and a 4th telling and a 5th telling and so on and so on. So I guess for me, the personal story I'm going to tell is less about a particular policy, because when I think about pluralism in real life, it's a posture. It's not a policy. But when you do come up against the real boundaries that we all do in real life, what posture do you have? So for example, when you come up against a border, are you a member of the Border Patrol? Are you a crossing guard? Are you an explorer? Are you a missionary? Those are all different postures in the pluralist drama. And I think the first person who gave me an incredible sense of that was actually the principal of the Solomon Schechter school I went to growing up. Now, I went to a Solomon Schechter because my parents were deeply committed, you will appreciate this, were deeply committed to Jewish education, but synagogue and religious rules were things we stayed away from religiously, right? So growing up, my favorite food happened to be shrimp cocktail. But before we ate it or anything else, we always said a bracha, right? We didn't think it was funny. It's all we knew. We made blessings because without ever being able to explain it, this is actually a pluralism story within a pluralism story, I just realized. My father had this deep intuition that when you eat together, that's sacred. And the language that we had as a Jewish family for sharing or articulating a moment that was sacred was to say a bracha. So we said blessings. Now that's how I'm raised. Now you have to picture, I'm about 10 years old, I'm in 4th or 5th grade, and it's Solomon Schechter, and we are learning that there are different brachot made on different foods. Leave aside the fact that the person teaching us this was a self-declared, completely secular Israeli woman who thought didn't make brachot on anything, which now we had some complication. As we learn all these different brachot, I'm waiting to see what's the bracha for shrimp. It never came up. We eventually get to Birkat HaMazon, right, to the grace after meals, and I discover that the paragraph Ya'aleh V'Yavo, the additional paragraph for holidays, is even said on Yom Kippur. And I said, these are my kind of rabbis. They know it's forbidden to eat. I mean, even I knew that. It's forbidden to eat, but if you've eaten, say a bracha. So I figured this is my moment. I raised my hand, and I asked my teacher, Mrs. Noy, what is the proper bracha for shrimp? Get out of my class. And I'm like, no, I'm serious. Get out of my class. Go to the principal's office. So I head on to the principal's office, and I was a little bit nervous because the truth is I was really a good kid in school. At the time, my father was chairman of the school board, and being sent to the principal, this was messy. I knock on the door of the principal's office. His name was Harry Kessler. He was an amazing man. He was really an amazing man. And he had a voice that was, anyone hear those talking mynah birds? That was his voice. So you knock on the door, he'd go, who is it? It's me, Mr. Kessler, it's Brad Hirschfield. What do you want? Well, I was thrown out of class and I was told I had to see you. Come in. And I'm like, no, I'm really scared. What are you doing here? I said, well, I asked Mrs. Noy what the bracha on shrimp was. Now, he was not naive. He knew that we were not, to say the least, among the most religiously observant families in the school. He could have taken that moment and he could have gently explained to me that, you know, it's a kosher school. And that really I can ask any question I want, but that maybe it would be better to ask those kinds of questions in private. Or he could have looked at me and explained beautifully, because he was a master explainer, all the wonderful elements that keeping kosher opens up for us and why I might want to consider adding no shrimp to my practice of making brachot. He didn't do either. He looked at me and said, "Why did you ask that question?" And that was an unbelievable moment, because in the face of what he very much experienced as a transgression, he did believe there were yeses and nos. And there was no question for Harry Kessler that eating shrimp was on the no list. But in the face of what he experienced as transgression, what won out was his curiosity about my experience. For me, one of the defining features of a pluralist posture has nothing to do with the conclusions we reach, because we'll keep reaching them and re-reaching them and re-reaching them. It's whether or not we're actually genuinely curious about the experience of those who do and say and advocate for things which we continue to experience is genuinely transgressive. We really think they're wrong, but we're deeply curious about what we have to learn from them. And the amazing thing is, because he even managed to teach text, was he said, "Well, what bracha do you make?" Because now he was going to, do it as serious halacha. I explained we said hamotzi for everything, because we did. And then, with more curiosity, why that one? I mean, really, this is like a page of Talmud unfolding in front of you, right? And I said, "Well, that's the one my father taught me." He said, "Well, you know what the Talmud says about the blessings you learn from your parents and grandparents?" And I knew enough to know this was not the moment to say, "What's the Talmud?" even though I had no idea. So I just said to him, "No, Mr. Kessler, what does it say?" It says it's like hearing those words from God at Mount Sinai. So I think that's the one you should keep saying. Now go back to class. Right? And there is no doubt in my mind that along with my parents who taught that practice, Harry Kessler, of blessed memory, was a real Rebbe of what I mean by pluralism.